Hello, this is Mike Madden and you're listening to the Arts Show podcast. Here you will find interviews with artists, musicians, authors and anyone else in and around the arts. Some of the interviews are recorded direct from the Arts Show on Expat Radio, with one or two specials in between. This episode features author Phoebe Morgan talking about her latest book, The Girl Next Door. Phoebe also gives us fabulous insight into the publishing industry. The show was originally broadcast on Expat Radio on Monday the 25th of February 2019. Due to licensing restrictions, we were unable to play the songs from the original broadcast. This is Mike Madden on the Arts Show on Expat Radio, and tonight my special guest is author Phoebe Morgan. Hello, Phoebe.
Hi.
Good evening, and you're here to talk about your latest book, The Girl Next Door, which was released just last Thursday, so it's been a very exciting time for you.
Yeah, it has. It's been a bit of a whirlwind few days. It's always quite nerve-wracking having a book coming out, but it's been received well so far, so I'm feeling positive.
I've just checked, and there's more than 70 reviews on Amazon already, so it's very popular. So just tell our listeners a little bit about the synopsis without giving too much away.
Of course. So The Girl Next Door is a psychological thriller, and it's about a small town in Ashton in the UK, in Essex, and it's about what happens when a 16-year-old girl called Claire is found murdered in a local village field, and the fallout from that. And Ashton is the sort of town where everyone is a suspect. It's very kind of close-knit, claustrophobic, middle-class community. And so it's basically a murder mystery and an investigation into who killed Claire Edwards and why.
And this is your second book. You had The Dollhouse out this time last year. And is there any sort of connection between the two, or are they both standalone books?
They're both standalone. The Dollhouse was my debut, and this is the second one. And they're in the same genre. They're both psychological suspense, but they feature completely different characters and different storylines. Right.
So I did notice with The Dollhouse, you had some very specific releases listed. So the release in Italy and Norway was listed separately. Was there any particular reason that these markets are separated out for this particular book?
Well, they were bought. The book was bought by different publishers. So it was bought by an Italian publisher and a Norwegian publisher, and it's actually just been bought by a French publisher as well, which is really exciting. Because French is kind of the only other language I can even sort of halfway speak. So I'm really excited about that. And so they bought it separately and translated it separately and come up with their own cover designs, which has been really interesting because they're quite different from the UK cover, and they've also changed the title for the Italian one, I think just to make it suit their market a little bit more.
Right, so it's interesting that the rights have been sold separately, because we'll touch on your career now, because you are currently a commissioning editor. So I guess with editor, author, editor, there's a little bit of poacher turn gamekeeper there, but as an editor, does that make you more critical of your own work?
I think it probably does. As you say, I'm an editor by my day job, so I know the publishing process really well by this point, which I think is quite helpful for me because a lot of debut authors, understandably don't know the ins and outs of how to get your book published and what the editorial stages will be. But thankfully, I knew all that, so it wasn't a surprise to me to sort of have to do edits from my agent and have to do edits from my editor, HQ. But I think it's made me maybe slightly more used to it. I don't know whether I'm necessarily a better editor for it, because it can always be very difficult editing your own book. I find it much easier to edit someone else's novel because you're a bit removed from it and you've had the time to kind of reflect on the entire book, and you can send your comments to the author and it's more of a discussion. And it's not personal, whereas when it's my own, it feels a lot more personal, and I'm really close to the manuscript, so I might not necessarily spot things in the same way as I would in another person's book.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you can always overlook things when you're doing your own book. Do you ever sort of disagree with what your editor's telling you about your book?
I did actually Yeah, so with The Girl Next Door, without giving away too many spoilers, there was a specific ending that I wanted to give the book, and my editor suggested a different ending, and she kind of pushed me on it a couple of times, and I originally didn't want to do it. And it's not that I didn't trust her opinion, because I do trust her, and I think she's amazing. She's a brilliant editor. And in the end, I did do what she had suggested, and I'm actually really glad that I did. In hindsight, I think it's worked really nicely. And in the last couple of days since it's been out, I've had a lot of people message to say they really liked the ending. So I think I'm sure she was right. But definitely, I do sometimes disagree with her, and I think that's natural. I think it's just part of the process, because one thing I always say to my own authors is that when you receive the edits from your book, it's good to take like a few hours or a few days just to decompress and let the notes sink in, rather than immediately starting work. It can feel a bit overwhelming when you've got someone critiquing your own manuscript that you've spent so long working on. But overall, I think it's good to listen to your editor, and a good editor will always have the conversation with you and listen to your opinion as well. And usually there's either a compromise, or one of you will come around to the other person's point of view.
Yeah, and I think it's quite important that sort of non-published authors and maybe independent authors understand that it is a huge collaboration to produce a book in the traditional manner.
Yeah, definitely. I think collaboration is definitely the right word. As in my day job, I work with about 15 to 20 different authors, and I'm really involved with their novels. I will do a big structural edit where we look at the bigger picture stuff, and anything that needs moving around, any characters that need changing, and then I'll do a line edit where I go through it really detailed line by line. So by the time the book actually goes to press, I've read it probably like 3 or 4 times. So the editor does get really close to it as well, and along the way I'll always sort of talk to my authors on the phone if they want to, or meet up with them, and everything will kind of be a discussion rather than me sort of giving them orders or telling them exactly what to do, because I don't think that's fair. It's always got to be a collaborative process, and an editor will bring different strengths to the novel, and an author will have their own ideas, and sometimes marketing and publicity might have their own ideas as well. So it's definitely, there's a lot of people that go into making one novel.
And you had a career as a journalist, and then you moved into the publishing industry, and I know your website is a great store of information about the journey into the publishing industry. And you got an agent in Darley Anderson, the Darley Anderson agency. So just talk us a little bit through the transition to getting an agent, because that must have been quite an exciting thing in itself.
Oh, it was. I think getting my agent was a really big milestone for me in terms of my writing career, because she was brilliant from the day I sent it to her. Really, I sent her the manuscript, I think on like a Tuesday, and she came back to me on the Friday saying, "Oh, can I see the rest of it?" So I originally sent her the first 3 chapters, which is what you'd normally do when you're submitting to agents. And she responded really quickly. And then she gave me quite a lot of editorial notes on my first book, The Doll House. And so I worked on those with her before she offered me representation. So by the time she actually offered me representation, we might have been working together for about 6 months already. And I was getting it to sort of the standard that she needed, and that she, taking on the notes that she'd suggested. So that by the time it went out on submission to publishers, I felt as though we were definitely going with the best version, because it wasn't anywhere near close to a first draft. And, it's interesting because working in publishing, I see the very traditional side of the publishing process. So most of the books that I buy are from literary agents rather than from, authors directly. But then I do think that in the last few years, there have been so many changes to the publishing industry that more and more authors are choosing self-publishing, or they're going with independent presses and slightly smaller publishing houses. And, that can be just as exciting a route. I think it really depends what you want from your career. And for me, having an agent has meant that, I have maybe, a bit more security. I have someone to negotiate the deal for me, and I don't have to do that myself. So that there are really like pros and cons to having an agent or not having one. But for me, I'm very glad to have Camilla. She's called Camilla Bolton, and she works at Darley Anderson, as you said. And so I probably signed with her in 2014, and then over the last few years we've been working together, and she's now sold 3 of my books, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a little bit of pressure off yourself, and you've got somebody to sort of, if you're ever feeling down, you've got the agent to talk to. They can talk to you, because I know it was quite a journey from getting your first book
sort of accepted by an agent to actually getting it out there to a publisher and appearing on bookshelves?
Yeah, it took quite a long time, and it was quite an up and down process. So we had a few sort of near misses for the Dollhouse. Actually, we did have one offer that we turned down, and then we had sort of a couple of people that liked it and wanted me to work on it. And then eventually we had the HQ offer, but it wasn't a kind of quick, flashy process. So I think I was very grateful to have Camilla there with me and guiding me through that and giving me the support, because there are obviously times when you feel as though, you feel like giving up and you think, oh, this book isn't going to get anywhere. But she always really encouraged me to carry on with that. And, I think the other thing about having an agent is that they will usually support you in your next book. So I know quite a lot of authors that they didn't sell their original novel, their debut novel, and their agent went on to sell their second novel or their fifth novel or their 10th novel. And so having an agent means that you've still got kind of a foot in the door, even if you might not be physically published yet. So I personally have found it really helpful.
Yeah, and I guess it's the first relationship that you have as an author. If you can get an agent, it can be an agent for life, even if you switch publishers. So I guess any interaction like that, you could say that's life. And we're going to just go to a break with Frank Sinatra, and that's life. Good evening, everybody. This is Mike Madden on the Art Show on Expat Radio. And tonight I'm talking to Phoebe Morgan, author of The Girl Next Door. Good evening again, Phoebe.
Good evening.
Now, before the break, we were talking about your latest release and your previous one, The Dollhouse, and also your journey into publishing. And one thing that will support any author out there is a good website. And I could definitely say that you've got a very good website. And one particular piece was about how a book deal works and the minutiae of the contract. I think when you talked before about what you'd agreed with your agent and the publisher, just explain to our listeners what you can actually change as an author in your contract rather than just sign a standard contract.
So I'm glad that you found the website useful. It basically is intended to help authors who are either looking to get published or people that are already published and sort of looking for advice on what happens next. But with a book contract, most of them are quite standardized. So there'll be a sort of standard set of royalties and a standard, ins and outs of what publicity you'll get and what marketing you'll get and what rights the publisher owns compared to what rights the agency still owns or the author still owns. So another reason that I find it useful to have an agent, as I was discussing before, is that an agent will be able to negotiate slightly more on the book contract, and they will be able to perhaps ask the publisher to give you better royalties or more money, or hold back more rights so that they can sell your book more widely. As far as an author goes, it might be that you don't get to negotiate a huge amount, so there will be some things that a publisher won't be able to move on because it will be the kind of corporate policy, especially with a really big company like HarperCollins. It's quite tricky to change certain aspects of your contract. But my advice would basically be to, if you've got an agent, speak to the agent and ask their opinion on, whether it's a good contract to sign and what the ins and outs are, in case there's something in there that's personal to you and you feel strongly about changing. But I would say it is quite normal to not have a huge amount of say over what would get changed and what wouldn't.
And I think as well, going back to your website, there's another interesting piece about how to get a job in publishing. And it makes a very good comparison between getting a job in publishing in your career and actually getting a book to publication, because both of them are about research and researching not only on the career side, but also who you're submitting to. So there's no point submitting a horror novel to somebody who's looking for rom-coms.
Exactly. I think there are something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily know when they're starting out is about how different publishing imprints are. So an imprint is like a division or a list within a larger publishing house, and they will be really quite different in terms of what they're looking for. So as an editor, I publish a lot of crime and thriller, and we publish very commercial fiction, so sort of paperback fiction that will be sold primarily through the supermarkets and WH Smith and a little bit through Waterstones, but we don't publish very literary hardback fiction. It's not something that we are looking for. But there will be other divisions of HarperCollins that are focusing on sci-fi, or that focus on historical, or focus on more literary stuff. So I think a really important thing is to check out the different websites of the publishers before you submit your book, because an editor will have quite a specific set of guidelines as to what they want, and the same goes for agents. If you look on the agency websites first, they'll normally have what's called a wish list. So they'll say, I am looking for, holiday romance, or I am looking for crime, but I'm not looking for science fiction, I'm not looking for young adult. And I feel that so many writers sort of overlook this and send out their book just to anybody, and to be honest, it's a waste of the writer's time, because if you just take half an hour to do a little bit of research, it will pay off, because then you can target your manuscript to an editor that might be really interested in buying it, and you can also look at what other books that editor has published in the past to get a sense of their taste, and I think that way you just stand a higher chance of getting yourself a book deal.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. That if a little bit of research will save you a lot of heartache in the long run. Now, you're obviously a woman of many talents, and a woman of great self-control, because you found out that there was something moving with your first book as you were chairing a panel at the London Book Fair. And I think most of us would have just stood up and told everybody in the audience what was happening. But you managed to keep it to yourself. How did you do that?
Oh, it was quite strange. I was so this was probably 2 years ago, because the London Book Fair is coming up in March, so it was probably exactly 2 years ago, and I was chairing a panel about getting into publishing. So I was speaking to a lot of young publishers and people that want to do publishing as a career, so not write a book themselves, but join the publishing industry. And my phone kept sort of flashing up with these emails from my agent Camilla, who was also at the book fair, and she'd been talking to HQ. And so it was quite exciting, because I could see the kind of, when you're looking on your phone and you can see like the first bit of an email. And so I knew it was going to be something interesting, but I just couldn't really look at it, because I was in the middle of chairing this panel, and it was all live. So I just had to ignore it, and then I looked at it afterwards, but it was quite anxiety inducing, as you can imagine.
I'm not sure how you controlled yourself. I would have had to have looked.
Really? Well, I mean, maybe I did see the first bit, so I might have looked a tiny bit distracted, but I couldn't look at it properly, because I felt like it was something that needed my full attention.
Now, as a commissioning editor, you will have, I know you've attended lots of launch days. So what did you plan for your particular launch day?
So my launch day was on Thursday, so last week, and I had a book launch at Hatchard's in Piccadilly, which is a branch of Waterstones, but it's a really lovely old bookshop. They have like 3 stories, and it's just a really beautiful place. And I've been to a couple of launches there before, so I thought it would be a nice venue. And we basically just had a lot of prosecco and cake, and my editor came, and my colleagues came, and my friends and family, which was really nice. And it's not something I did for the Dollhouse. So, and I don't know if I'll do it again, because it's quite a lot of organisation, and it's sort of almost a bit stressful, having to sort it all out. But I did a book signing, and we sold all the books that we had, which was about 50 copies, 50 paperbacks. So I was quite pleased, because I was, with those things, you're always so worried, like, is anyone going to show up, or is anyone actually going to buy the book? But I felt like it went quite smoothly. And yeah, I think it's always nice to do something to mark the day, because, it's something that I had dreamed about for so long, and that I'm sure a lot of people listening might dream about as well. So to kind of celebrate it with the people that you care about is a really nice moment.
Yeah, I think that's right. Now going back to the London Book Fair, you actually won the London Book Fair Trailblazer Award in 2018. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Trailblazers are an award. I think it's for people under 30 who are just sort of, who are seen to be doing well in their career. And they run in association with the London Book Fair, and so there was an awards ceremony probably this time last year, and I had been longlisted or shortlisted or something, but I really didn't think I was going to win, so I went along, and it was a really nice evening. And then they got to the section where they would read out the prize winners, and obviously I did win, and which was really nice, and I was really, really surprised. And there are 5 winners per year, so it wasn't just me. And you get a little award, a little glass award, which I've got on the shelf, which was great. It was just one of those moments where you're really, really genuinely surprised. But I think the Trailblazers are great, because a lot of people apply each year, and I've recommended one of my friends for one this year, and they're just a nice way to kind of recognise that people are working hard and sort of doing different things. And the other 4 people that won were really impressive. I did not think I deserved to be among them, but it's a nice way to meet your peers and meet people of a similar age and get to know about the sort of exciting projects that other people in publishing are doing. So I think they're definitely really good support for people my age in the industry.
That's a fantastic achievement, and it doesn't end there, because you also run writing workshops, and you kind of think it seems that the written word is all consuming in your life. So what do you actually do to escape books, if you even want to escape books?
It is quite difficult. I basically just think I can't really do anything else, so I end up doing, publishing and writing and workshops because I suppose it's what I feel most comfortable doing. And the thing is, I do really enjoy it, so I'm lucky in that respect. But to escape books, I don't know, it's hard. I try and listen to podcasts. So I listen to a lot of Desert Island Discs, and I never listen to the writers because I just want something different. So I listen to a lot of scientists and doctors and people doing things in completely different fields, which is quite a good way to switch off, because you do get to a stage where every single aspect of your life is involved in the publishing industry in some way, and that can be quite all-consuming. My boyfriend is also an engineer and a rower, and he's very different from me in that respect. So it's nice to have like his interests and his life, to talk about, as well as my publishing obsession.
And it's always interesting when somebody does have this obsession with books. Forgive me for calling it an obsession, but but where it all started. So what did you read as a child?
So I read a lot when I was a child. We didn't actually have a television, which I think probably was a big part of it, because I genuinely, I played outside quite a lot, but, my main thing was reading, because we just didn't watch TV. So I read all the classic stuff, really. So I used to read a lot of Enid Blyton, a lot of like Mallory Towers series, and, as I got older, it would be sort of, as her books progressed, I would read the slightly like more teenage ones. And I read a lot of Narnia, like Harry Potter, like genuinely just a lot of those classic kind of books. And my mum used to read to us. So I have got two younger brothers. So she used to read to us like a chapter each night, and she used to read us Harry Potter. And then we all got a bit too old for that. And also we got really competitive about it, because as the series went on, we wanted to know like what happened next. So we ended up having to buy like 3 copies of the book, because we couldn't manage to share one book, because we were so keen to find out what happened. But I do think that reading as a child is really important. I think it's, any kind of literacy initiative that the UK is doing is really vital to get children reading from a young age, because it can really instill that kind of passion for words within you. And it can, a lot of people that I know in publishing and writing have been similar, read a lot as a child, been sort of less focused on TV and, more interested in the world of fiction. And it can really spark a child's imagination, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think these days it's less TV and it's more computer games, Xboxes and that kind of thing, which is the distraction.
Yeah, you're right. I probably sound even dated talking about TV, but I think you're right, actually. That's another big thing. And it's not that those things are necessarily bad, and I think they probably do have other benefits, but it always makes you feel a bit sad if people don't get that chance to read at all. I think, and I think that's why it's so important for books to be kind of really accessible to everybody. And a lot of people, especially ebooks at the moment are sold for like 99p, 1.99, and mine are too. And a lot of the supermarkets will really discount books, and a lot of people don't like that. And I do understand why, but I also think in a way it's important for people to be able to afford books. And if we price them all at £20 and put them in Waterstones, it's Waterstones are a brilliant supporter of books, but not everyone can afford that. So for me, I do think it's important that we look at the way books are priced and the way that they're marketed. And of course, when an author has poured all their time and energy into a book and then it's sold for 99p, I do get why that might be frustrating. But from my perspective, I think it allows you to reach a wider audience. So if there are a lot of people reading it for that price, you've managed to connect with people that might otherwise not be able to access a book.
No, I think you're right, and I think ebooks. I'm not sure. I don't think my children have ever read an ebook. I don't think they've read too many books since they didn't have to through school, and that's the disappointing thing. That the desire to read, if they have to, they will, but it's not a love of reading. It's almost forced.
Yeah, well, I mean, it might come later in life, and I think you saying about schools is important as well, and it is really important for schools to think about reading in that way. And also, I mean, I'm not a teacher, so I don't know the ins and outs of the curriculum, but I think it's important to introduce new things to the curriculum. I think it's important to teach young people that it's not all about reading, classic literary fiction on its own. I think there are really contemporary writers that are coming through and people that we ought to pay attention to that sometimes might get overlooked in the sort of classic school structure. And that's another reason that libraries are so important, because they might get those books, and people that couldn't normally afford books, or children, might be able to visit the library and get them for free. And I used to do that when I was little. Like, we had a library in Suffolk where I grew up, so we had a local library that I went to all the time because the books were free and it was easy and it was really accessible. So I think the rate that libraries are closing in England, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but that's really sad. I don't think that they should be closing as much as they are here.
No, I think you're right about the libraries, because when I was a child, I used to go to the library, and you also got, I think, was it 2 weeks you got before you had to take it back? So it kind of, you had 2 weeks to read that book, and you could go and extend it, but generally you read 2 or 3 books in 2 weeks, took them back, and then got 2 or 3 more.
Yeah, definitely. I think you get into a little routine, so that encourages people to read more, because they've sort of got that deadline, and they know they've got to take it back, and it becomes a little process. So yeah, I think that's really important.
So we're running out of time now. In fact, we've already overrun, but Dave's not said anything, so we'll carry on. But as I say, your book came out last week, so just tell the listeners where they can find out a little bit more about the book, where they can get hold of it. It's in several different countries now, but also just give them a link to your absolutely fascinating and informative website.
Thank you. So my website is www.phoebemorganauthor.com, and Phoebe is Phoebe. So you can find my social media links on there, and you can also read all about the articles we've been discussing, so how to get into publishing and how to write a book and all the ins and outs of that. And The Girl Next Door is available at the moment on Amazon UK. It's also available in Asda and Sainsbury's and Waterstones in the UK. It's coming out in Canada, I think, later this year or next year, and hopefully in the US potentially later this year or next year as well. And The Dollhouse is also coming out in the US and Canada, and it's published in a few other territories. But if you go on my Amazon page, it will link you to everything.
And are you putting in an appearance at the London Book Fair in March?
Yeah, so I'm speaking as a guest on a panel about publishing on the Wednesday of the London Book Fair, which will be good, hopefully. And I'm also doing a couple of workshops this summer and later in the year at sort of local literary festivals in Suffolk. So if you are around, I'll put the details on my website and you'll be able to come to one of those.
Well, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you tonight, Phoebe. And hopefully, if you've got another book coming out next year, you'll come back on and tell us all about that one as well.
I do. I would love to. I'm about to hand it in, but it'll probably be published, I think, this time next year, my third book. So it'll be great. And thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. And we're now going to play out with Westlife and Hello My Love. You've been listening to the Arts Show podcast with Mike Madden. Come back soon for more artists, authors, musicians and anyone else connected with the arts. We're going to play out with Mike Sanchez and I Don't Stand a Chance.
Baby, you hiding something that you don't want me to know, because I'm getting a vibe from way down the side, like you're just about ready to go. And you can't tell me where you stayed last night. You just can't cope with treating me right. I'm on the road to heartbreak. Now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be ill. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna know and I can't make you dance. Well, I said goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance. Before despair. Am I on the road to heartbreak? Now's the time to tell me so, because I'm getting a chill like I'm gonna be here. I know you don't want me no more. I won't be satisfied with your little white lies. Girl, I've only just begun to realize I don't stand a chance. No, I don't stand a chance. You don't wanna know when I can't make you dance. Well, I'll say goodbye. Find yourself another guy. I wish you were mine, but I'm losing my mind. I don't stand a chance.